All right, before I start the video, I kind of want to show this off because I thought this was cool. I bought this for like $10. Look at it. It's so cool. It's got a bunch of fish on it. It's like a big poster. Goodwill. Who knew? I have no idea where to actually like hang it because it's really heavy and I don't actually I rent this place, so who knows. But it's cool. Anyways, today we're talking about EU franchising. EU has played a lot more games than like North America has. Even more than Asia, but Asia also has quite a few show matches so far. I'm here to talk about them, rank them, how I think they're going to do. It's kind of my preseason ranking. Again, might not be completely accurate because some of these players I haven't really watched a lot of. I don't know how they're going to gel together as a team. So this is very preliminary. We don't really know what's going on, but we're going to do our best to kind of predict it. Let's start with one of the heavy hitters, NaVi. Oh my God. NaVi had like the best offseason anyone could ever have. Prior to franchising, NaVi was a big team. They had a good competitive team, but not the best team, right? They did, in fact, drop all of their players, though. Some have been picked up by other teams, which is nice. But the NaVi organization is so prestigious in CSGO that I think having a roster of their caliber now is going to be really good. What they did was they picked up the previous FPX team and made it better, which is really interesting because they're the only top 5 team from 2022 that just took their current roster and made it better by just like adding one player or two, right? Think about it. DRX stayed the same. PaperX stayed the same. Optic folded, and so did Loud. Loud had a big roster shakeup. So NaVi's the only one that kind of kept this sort of main core and just only upgraded a single pot. Angel Shao, Zipan Soigetsu, and now CNED is coming on too. Damn, that's a good roster. This team, by far, S ranking, probably one of, if not the best teams in EU franchising. NaVi actually played in the G-Loot Clash, which is actually a pretty good tournament overall, and they won it all. They had a few close matches, but overall, again, it's FPX, it's CNED. For sure, there's going to be a little bit of cohesion issue coming in because this was such a good team coming in from last year. But now with CNED, I think the ceiling of this team has gone a lot higher without really sacrificing the floor of it. They're just so good. And it's good seeing this prestige coming back to the NaVi organization from a Valorant front, at least. Next, we have Fnatic. This is another team that kind of kept a main core and added just a new player, which also, if you don't know, is one of the best players in the world. Again, they added Chronicle to their team of already Boaster, Leo, Dirk, and Alpha. A great set of players. Fnatic has been close with this roster for the most part, but they always just fall short just a tiny bit, going in as either tournament favorites or upper placement favorites, I guess. So hopefully with this new player, Chronicle, and we forget how good Chronicle was because he was making a case for the best player in the world back in 2021. But because of the Russia situation and because of kind of the scene of EU became hard, Gambit lost all of their funding, so they were just M3E, Masters 3 champions. So hopefully with this new structure around him, he can kind of come back to just playing as one of those guys again. Again, this roster is insanely good. Do I think they are tournament or regional favorites? Maybe. I'm considering it. I think this is the team that is closest on the edge, but because of their lack of success previously, despite having so many great players on it, just falling short, I'm going to have to keep them as an A ranking for now. They'll definitely do very, very well in the overall landscape of things, but I think it's going to be tough to compete with some of these other teams, especially the North American powerhouses. We've already seen how good they are. Next, we have Liquid, which is another interesting roster shakeup because Liquid has always been a surprisingly good team, despite how they have placed. Scream and NaVi are kind of the backbones of that team, with Yampi doing insanely well. Solkis also doing another great player. But they decided to break up with Scream and NaVi, which was kind of their branding, their icon, right, for a long time. I'm not sure exactly if it was like their choice or maybe they wanted to drop NaVi and Scream didn't really want to drop him. Scream's 27, maybe 28 now. So I feel like he's kind of in the power seat. He's still insanely good. But I think maybe Liquid just wanted to go into a different direction. Now they have Yampi, Safe, Redgar, Solkis, and Nats. This is another interesting rebuild because this is a complete roster shakeup. Nats as the new face of this team is going to be really interesting because, again, it's another Gambit guy that struggled with the previous team, and especially because of their situation. But Nats is still another great player. Also adding on Redgar on top of that, another amazing guy. I think this roster could do very well. Yampy is kind of their X factor because he has a lot of ups and downs. But if he can kind of iron those out and play a little more solid, I think it's going to be really good for this roster. They have actually played at the Red Bulls home ground event. I'm going to check the stats on that right now. As of day 2, they are 2-2 right now, beating Foot Esports and beating Heretics. Heretics is actually a pretty good roster. That's the one with Avova and Kelix. We'll get to that later. With Yampy doing well, they're actually not playing with Rat Nats or Rengar right now. So this isn't at their full power, but again, they're still looking good. Yeah, just 2 stand-ins for now. So they're definitely still in a top form, even if they don't have the perfect time under pressure. Liquid is another team that I think they have a high ceiling, but can also have a lower floor. I think Nats is an insanely consistent player, same with Redgar. So they will be more of like floor raisers, while also having those ceiling top-heavy players. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how they form to it, because this is a team that will need some time to work well together. With such a big roster shakeup, needs time to develop these new strats together. Next up, we got Vitality. Vitality is another organization that was kind of an EU bottom feeder, but is a big name for a lot of EU esports. So that's kind of why they got in. They needed a big restructuring of their team, and I think they did pretty well. They did decently well, at least. Bone Cold, Molesy, D-Strand, Twister, Sender. They were the runners-up for the VRL 2022. They upgraded their team since then. They did lose to NaVi, but other regional teams in the G League Clash, they kind of just dumpstered them. This is another team that I think we don't really know too much about. They have some London United guys, they have some big guys, but with a big roster change-up and no real like superstar in their team, at least not yet. At least not one that I noticed too much. They kind of have to do their best to make it up where it counts. I think without individual top-ended talent for EU and also no previous cohesion between them, it's going to be tough to kind of jump out right at the beginning. So I'm going to keep them as a kind of a mediocrity regional kind of guy. They're good players, but I think it takes a lot to win in the Valorant Franchising League, and these guys, it doesn't pop out at me, especially right away. Next, we have the Karamine Corp. This is the team that Scream and NaVi on, adding on with Xmas, Shin, and Nazera. I'm surprised that Karamine Corp was selected of the franchise teams because they've achieved literally nothing so far. But they needed a French representative, I guess. Even more surprising that they secured Scream and NaVi, 2 proven top-ended talents, onto their roster to kind of build around. This team is definitely going to have some growing pains, but their pieces seem solid enough, especially with no pre-built infrastructure from this organization, no clear ideas when it comes to how they're going to work, and even the small things as an esports organization, it's going to be tough. So there's definitely be some growing pains, but I could see them, especially with how good Scream even now has been playing with NaVi. It's going to be interesting. So I'm going to keep them as a B for now, because I don't think, again, it takes a lot to win right off the bat, and I think they're going to need to build that up first. So I'm going to keep them as a mediocre team, but I do have expectations for this team because they could be good. Then we got Giants. Giants is interesting, to say the least. Giants, again, completely restructured their team, keeping only Fitino, but adding in Rhyme, Nuki, Hoodie, and Cloud. A lot of different players from different organizations. So again, they're going to need this time to kind of build up this team play style and team infrastructure before they compete with some of these teams that have been competing for a long time. And another issue with this roster, maybe not an issue, but I think another thing to note is that they have a lot of duelists on this roster. Literally, Rhyme, Fitino, Nuki, Cloud, these guys are literally all duelist players. They played in the G Loot, and they did lose to the non-franchise team Parla Esports, but they seem pretty good, actually. Being a new roster, they do need that time to grow. It all depends on what their strategy is going in. These are all, again, individually great players. They have that tactic, so if they can learn to slow things down, either that or play this new fast play style, I think they could be another good team. I'm going to keep them as a B, though, because they don't have that, from what we've seen so far, they don't have that impact, that immediate oomph, especially compared to some of these other teams that we're going to talk about right now. Heretics does seem very good. Mixwell, Avova, Zeke, Boo, and Kellox. A lot of G2 guys. Ascend from the world champion from 2021. Zeke is back. This team looks really good on paper, and it all depends on how well they gel together. They did play in the APAC Invitational, taking a map from Paper Rex, and they're losing a single map to an unfranchised Team Seeker. But other than that, they're also playing the Red Bull tournament right now. They did go 1-2, losing to Liquid and Vitality, beating Foot, and losing to 100 Thieves. So that's a little tough, but the caliber of player on this team, I think, is very strong. They do have a lot of good players that have proved it at the top level, which is a big thing that I personally weigh when talking about these teams. While right now on paper they don't necessarily seem like regional contenders, I think they will get to that spot a lot faster than some of these other unproven teams, and so that's why I'm going to keep them as more so a regional contender. It's maybe just wishful thinking, but I think they're going to be there.
So I made a bit of an oopsie when I originally recorded this. Koi hadn't released their full roster. Before they guess they were using a stand-in roster, but only for their show matches, which was kind of an odd choice. I thought that'd be their actual roster. Either way, Koi's roster kind of sucked. Their main pickups are Coldamenta, Shados, Trex, as well as Wolfen. They've only announced 4 players so far. Coldamenta and Trex coming from Guild, both with great LAN experience, very solid teams from Europe, making it to Masters Copenhagen. So they're kind of in that A-tier contention, alongside also snapping up their coach, which I think is really good. And additionally, they have Shados, who is another great player coming from the Masters 3 Championships, ex-Gambit. Shados, another great player, super solid. I think this 3 will really add to that core of consistency. They're adding Wolfen coming from Case Esports, which is pretty interesting because usually when they add these young players like this, it usually points to them believing as their kind of higher potential players. Wolfen was, in fact, the best player from this Case Esports, and they saw some success, especially with the Red Bull Homeground event, doing pretty well in their groups. With no 5th player, I can't exactly pinpoint how they'll be, but I do think the foundings of a good team. They have a solid bottom. They have high potential. I think this is a team that could really show up as the season goes on, but I think because they're starting from scratch, it's going to be hard to get there. I'm going to give them a B. I'm going to give them kind of, they're going to be sort of mediocre to start, but I think by the end of the year, and maybe the beginning of next year, this could be a really good squad.
Then we have the BBL team. I'm not the most familiar with Turkish Valorant, so I don't want to talk too much ish on their name, but there are literally better Turkish teams available right now. We literally saw with Parla Esports doing so well at the most recent tournament, and there's just not, they're not anything good. Again, Turco, Aslan, Elite, Brave, Kyoshner X, I believe I'm saying that right. They're going to need a lot to keep developing, and I'm going to keep them as a C as well, similar to Koi, but the most egregious one is Foot, because at least BBL made some roster changes, but Foot just kept their whole team of losers. Okay, that's rude. Foot is by far the most disappointing EMEA team. They won the Red Bull Homegrounds 3 qualifier. Cool. But they've consistently lost to both franchised and non-franchised team. Let's go through their record literally right now. They have lost their last 5 games, losing to Parla Esports, another Turkish organization with Turkish players, Team Divinity from the G-Luke Clash round of 16. Who are these guys? It was a best of 3 too. They lost to Liquid 2-0. They lost to Heretics 2-0. They lost to 100 Thieves 2-0. This team does not look good. I don't know if they just don't want to drop their whole roster, but they should consider making some sort of change instead of just hoping that something will change, because that is the biggest thing about franchising, is that teams need to adapt or die. If you're not updating your roster with the best available resources, just assuming that they'll continue to play as they currently are, that's just not the case. And I think this is another C tier team, because they are not going to be able to keep up with the rest of the competition, especially in the competitive EMEA. So let's quickly go over kind of what we talked about today. We have some great teams: NaVi, Fnatic, Liquid. They're all looking fantastic, especially the NaVi team. Jesus. Heretics, Giants also looking quite well. There are some mid teams that I think will need to build that infrastructure back up before competing, and some hot trash team. You don't see a lot of hot trash teams, but EMEA is filled with them, I guess. Maybe I'm not giving them enough credit, and I think I'm definitely not. I think there'll be a lot of things that I'm going to say now that I'm going to regret later.